Kamala Harris is going to stop the IRS taxing the hospitality workers in the United States on their tips. Except she's the Vice President of the United States, and she and Joe Biden have been in power for 3.5 years. She could this night determine that the hospitality workers of the United States of America can keep their tips free of taxation. Anyway, she stole that policy from Donald Trump, who stole it from Ron Paul. She steals accents wherever she goes. She was in Nevada today. God knows what accent she addressed them in. When she's in front of a black crowd, she's Kamala from the Hood, talking like a rap artist. When she's in Nevada, where there was not a black face to be seen today, presume she was, leaning towards her Indian heritage. Most of the crowd seemed to be from the subcontinent. But Chameleon is rising in the polls. And Donald Trump doesn't look to me like he has got the fire in his belly that he is going to require. Maybe that shot that he took to his ear has knocked some stuffing out of him. But if he's not careful, they're going to rig 2024 just like they rigged 2020. And they can only do that if Trump does not win overwhelmingly and absolutely decisively. Jill Stein, my candidate, looks like she's on track for 5% of the national vote, despite not being on every ballot, despite the Democrats who said democracy was on the ballot, going to court after court after court to try and keep the Green Party candidate off the ballot. But if she gets 5%, she will, and they will, hereafter be on every ballot. And not just that, they'll receive millions in matching funds from the US government. There is everything to play for if you are a radical in America. Get your votes behind Dr. Jill Stein, the only Jewish candidate in the race. Although, ironically, sometimes you think the American election is about nothing but the Jewish people in the United States and around the world. But there's only one Jewish person on the ballot, and they don't want to mention her because she's the only candidate who opposes the so-called Jewish state's apartheid repression of the Palestinian people and their genocidal onslaught on the people of Gaza. 100 people and more at prayer, praying the dawn prayer, Al-Fajr. 1 second they were praying, the next minute they were literally mince meat. Not a single whole body remained from an American 2,000-pound bomb which smashed into the prayer service and literally decimated, cut into ribbons and pieces the people at prayer at that dawn early hour. They say the darkest night is just before the dawn. This was the worst massacre since the last worst massacre, the place and name of which you've already forgotten and the people in power in Western countries never knew in the first place. Remember the Al-Ahli Hospital massacre? Remember the Flower massacre? Virtually nobody does. Massacre after massacre. Now, if the Muslim world, if the Muslim Ummah actually had been a thing, then this would have been the final straw, surely. More than 100 people in the act of prayer, making sujood and cut to pieces in such a manner that nobody got a body to bury. They were literally handed plastic bags of human mince meat. That would have been the final straw for, I don't know, the likes of Turkey, wouldn't it? Would it have been the last straw for the likes of Saudi Arabia, wouldn't it? Would it have been the last straw for Gaza's neighbour, Egypt, Palestine's neighbour, Jordan? That would have been surely a Rubicon that had been crossed, but sadly not yet, at least. The Houthi leader said about 6 hours ago that the revenge operation for the murder of Shukr, the Lebanese resistance leader in Beirut, and the murder of Ismail Haniyeh, the Palestinian resistance leader in Tehran, was underway. An oddly specific word. It clearly hasn't meant that the rockets were already in the air, but it must mean that the engines are turning, don't you think? Certainly the CIA thinks. Certainly the CNN thinks. Certainly all Western capitals said on Friday that the revenge attack will begin within 72 hours. 72 hours will be up pretty shortly. Iran has just said that its air response will last 3 to 4 days. The fact that it specified air response suggests to me, a student of the English language, that there will be other, longer responses, but that the air traffic better stay out of the way entirely for 3 to 4 days. So the remaining people in Israel, and hundreds of thousands of them have fled the country, many never to return, no doubt, will better have stocked up on their luxury products in their air raid shelters. Because it's no wish of mine, and I doubt it's any wish of Iran, and it's explicitly not the wish of Iran's most powerful allies, Russia and China, that civilian people in Israel should be killed and maimed in these attacks. These attacks are likely to be upon military and political infrastructure in Israel. And if they're going to last 3 to 4 days, it's not likely that much of that military and political infrastructure will still be standing at the end of it. This is a revenge attack of a new type. This is a special military operation, and it will be hybrid in character, I'm perfectly sure. It will be economic, it will be electronic, it will be aerial, and it will be on land. Of these things, I am perfectly sure. Now, what Israel will do at the end of these retaliatory revenge attacks will decide whether we go into World War III in East Asia. Sounds like George Orwell, doesn't it? Oceania has always been at war with East Asia, as it said in 1984. It's beginning to be true in 2024. But whether we go into World War III in East Asia will be determined by what the United States government, if it still has a government. Joe Biden's just been on television explaining that he was overthrown. He was the victim of a coup. That prominent Democrats came to him and told him that the Democratic Party was afraid that he was hurting them further down the ticket in the congressional and Senate and gubernatorial races that will take place on the same day as the presidential election in November. Nancy Pelosi, in a rare moment of sobriety, said that when she read Joe Biden's resignation letter, and I quote her, it didn't sound like Joe Biden at all. That's because it wasn't. Even his signature was forged on that piece of paper that went out as a tweet and has never been properly explained. The Democrats overthrew Joe Biden because of his advanced senility, which means he's not making the decisions about what the United States is going to allow its Israeli attack dog to do at the end of the hybrid revenge attacks that are about to begin possibly this very evening. So if it isn't Joe Biden who will decide, who will it be? Kamala Harris? You serious? Kamala Harris will make a decision that will decide whether or not we end up in World War III in East Asia? Because, of course, if Israel and its United States ally launches a significant attack on Iran, then Russia and China are already committed through the security agreements that they have reached with Iran to defend the Islamic Republic, rapidly becoming one of the big three of the axis of resistance, the axis of resistance to American political, military, cultural, and economic domination of the globe. Iran, the BRICS, the SCO, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, they are all where it's at. We are so yesterday, we are so last year, we are so last decade. And instead of recognizing that and moving alongside it, seeking cooperation with it, our lunatics in charge of our asylums are determined upon war. The head of the German army, the Germans have still got an army, the head of the German army said today that Germany will be at war with Russia within the next 5 years. So I say, bring it on, Fritz, because it ended so well the last time. Bring it on, Fritz. I'm getting a little bit fed up after a mere 40 years of doing so, watching the reruns of the crushing of the Nazi beast in the rubble of Berlin. Bring it on, Fritz, in 5 years, a war between Germany and Russia. But it might be much sooner than 5 years, because in a surprise package, Zelensky, on his own volition, we're told that NATO was not consulted, has invaded Russia. Invaded the province of Kursk, where the greatest tank battle in history turned the tide of the Second World War, even more than the victory of the Red Army at Stalingrad, which could still have been reversed by the Nazi beasts. They mounted the biggest armored clash in all history at Kursk, and the Soviet army and armor prevailed. And after that, it was one long, unbroken charge towards Berlin and the aforementioned rubble. Well, Zelensky will live or die by this maneuver. I'm here to tell you my opinion. It's not Russia's opinion, they haven't said so, but my understanding of the nuclear doctrine of the Russian state is that this crosses the line into an existential threat to the Russian Federation, which gives Russia the authority under its doctrine to have first use of nuclear weapons, presumably battlefield nuclear weapons. So if the Ukrainians don't surrender, and they may yet, if the Ukrainian incursion into Russia is not crushed and decisively defeated, and it has not yet been, though there have been setbacks, then I fully expect President Putin to use battlefield nuclear weapons to end this invasion of his country. Because it's a NATO invasion, because the weapons that are being used are all NATO weapons, because there are hundreds, if not thousands, of foreign mercenaries. We assume they're mercenaries. Maybe they're there officially, but let's assume they are foreign mercenaries. And last but not least, there is significant evidence that the Ukrainian invasion of Russia has had recourse to the use of chemical weapons, principally chlorine. You see the yellow flames behind me. There are mass casualties of gas poisoning amongst the defending Russian forces. So when you break the prohibition on the use of weapons of mass destruction, when you invade Russia, as both Napoleon and Adolf Hitler did quite easily, then you have to face the fact that Russia will do anything at all to repel you, to repel the invaders, and to deliver a decisive message to them. It's easy to invade Russia. It's a gigantic piece of real estate, the biggest country in the world. The problem is how to get out of Russia without your invaders being destroyed. Both Napoleon and Hitler failed in that regard, and Zelensky ain't no Napoleon. And lastly, I was speaking last evening with a nuclear expert and asked him the $64,000 question. These missiles that the invading Ukrainians fired at the Kursk nuclear power station, if those missiles hadn't been shot down, if those missiles had managed to penetrate the roof of the Kursk nuclear power station, what would have been the effect? He told me quite candidly, the effect would be exactly the same as using a nuclear weapon itself. That's how close you came to Chernobyl times 10 if Zelensky's rockets had reached their target in the Kursk nuclear power station. So, if we're not at World War III, in East Asia, in the next days, we might well be in World War III in Eastern Europe in those same next few days. Fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be a bumpy night. It has to be, given the momentous nature of the subjects we are discussing tonight and the outstanding guests that we've brought along for your delectation. I'm George Galloway. This is the mother of all talk shows. Stay tuned. I'll be right back.